Yeah, so I'm Denika and I'm a self-published teen author. I live in Wellington and I've released 4 books. 3 of them are in the Royal Orchid series. I have them here with me. So the Death Hunters, which is this one, Into the Flames, and the Ghost Warriors. And then The Last Kingdom is my newest release, and that came out on Halloween. And that's a standalone, but it introduces characters who will appear in the Royal Orchid series in the final book.
So you could ostensibly read it without reading the rest of the series.
Yeah, definitely. They can be read. You can either read the Royal Orchid series and then Last Kingdom, or either or. They can be read separately. Yeah.
Nice. So how did you begin writing like fantasy as a genre?
Yeah. Well, characters often come first for me, and sometimes the world, but mostly it's characters first. And it's really important for me to know about them and to know what matters to them and what they fear and what they want. And with fantasy, it's just as important to know the world that you're writing in, because you need to develop the world if it's in fantasy. If you're in a separate world, you can also write fantasy on Earth. But that's also important to know how your world relates to Earth. And it might not at all, it might be a completely separate world, but that is definitely a question you need to ask yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And what sort
inspiration? Yeah, sorry.
World building exercises do you do for the world building that you do? Sorry,
well, I often ask myself lots of questions, like what's the climate? What kind of people live there? Like with Royal Orchid, they live in Ghost Orchid, and it's really icy there. So I had to think about how they survived. How do they keep warm? What do they eat in a frozen wasteland? So that requires a bit of research. Yeah, well, they have greenhouses.
Of course.
Yeah, and lots of vegetables and like canned foods, and yeah, that's something I had to look up and find out. I didn't just know that. So while I think more research is needed for like a nonfiction novel, you definitely still need to figure things out and research things in a fantasy book as well.
Yeah, your Google searches must be pretty wacky.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah, the person that's the FBI agent that's looking at your data is just like, what is this person Googling? What is going on?
Yeah, I think I do have quite a few unusual searches.
Like, what would you say was your favorite? What would you say was the most unusual Google search you've made?
I looked up how to unpick locks once. how to pick a lock. Some questions around like wounds and what happens if you get shot with an arrow. Like, should you pull it out or should you leave it in? Mostly wounds. It's probably the main.
Attention to detail is important.
It is, yeah, because I don't want something bad to happen to my characters if they pull an arrow out when I'm trying to help them.
Exactly, and like, what if a kid reads that and they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna pull out this thing in my body. Yeah. That's what that character did in that book that I love, and that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be given bad lessons. Yeah.
Exactly. So how do you plot your books?
Well, I plot them first. Some authors just write. That is not me. I like to know where I'm going. So I generally know the beginning and the middle and the end and a few steps in between. I don't know everything, but I often plan out each chapter, and I get a big piece of paper and I spread it out on the ground, and I get little sticky notes and I color coordinate them for the characters, and then I write a few lines like they go to the cave, and just like enough to keep me on track. But I don't like to be too strict with it either, because sometimes a character will be like, no, I'm going to go off over here and do this. And I like to let them do that if needed, because sometimes the characters do steer the plot a bit. And that can be kind of interesting to see where that goes.
That's cool. Do they like live in your head, like their voices in your head?
They do.
Yeah, that must be so cool.
To me. Yeah, they encourage me and they tell me if I'm doing something wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, I'm not going this way. I want to go that way. And you're like, oh, you know what? Gotta do it.
Exactly. I don't like to ignore them, because that can mean they get a little bit mad and they stop talking to me, and I don't want that to happen.
No, where would your career be if your characters stopped talking to you? Ugh.
Exactly, it wouldn't be good.
So how do you make sure they have your characters have the right amount of depth? Obviously they talk to you, but are there other exercises that you ensure to make sure they have the right amount of depth in character development?
Yeah, so it's really important for me to understand the characters and know lots about them. And that means that not all the information I find out about them actually appears in the book. Like, I like to know what they'd want for a birthday present, for example. And then that might come into the book if I suddenly decide it's their birthday. But generally, it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and then there's lots more beneath it. So I generally have a list of questions that I ask them, like, what do you fear? What do you want? What's your goal? And I kind of interrogate them because I don't always want to give that information up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And is that an exercise you would recommend to young writers?
Definitely, yeah. Write out a list of questions. Think if you, write a list of questions and ask your character. And if they don't answer straight away, try to phrase it in a different way.
So it's like you're the interviewer of your own character.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Interview them.
So what made you choose fantasy over things like romance or crime?
Well, fantasy is my favorite genre. Pretty much most of the books that I like to read are fantasy. I think it's a really cool genre. And I really one of the things I really love about fantasy is fantastical creatures like pixies who appear in Last Kingdom, and elves, and I have a creature called a mystic wolf, and they appear in Into the Flames, and they bond with one human, and then the human they bond with, they can share thoughts and they can read each other's minds.
Like that. That's very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, fantastical creatures is definitely a favorite of mine.
So that's your favorite thing to write about when it comes to the genre?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I also like the weapons that they have.
Yes, totally. What's your favorite fantasy weapon?
I really like a bow and arrow.
Classic.
Yeah. I also quite like knives. I don't know if that's not just fantasy, but
no, they're useful, and you can hide them on your body quite easily, and you can make them really cool.
Yeah, and they're really deadly.
And they're really deadly, of course.
Yeah, they're really cool. Especially like twin knives. I like the double. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're pretty cool. That would be a fun fight scene to write with someone.
It would. It really would. One of my characters, Ash, actually does have twin knives. She's.
Good on you, Ash. You look amazing.
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining it's great. I love it. Thank you. I'm very keen. I think I'm gonna read all your books, and then I'm just gonna send you lots of questions about it, because now I have your email. You can never escape me, unfortunately. I mean, do you mind explaining the difference between a soft magic system and like a hard magic system? Because I don't feel like a lot of kids know what the difference is.
Yeah, well, I think that the rules are less defined and they're less restrictive in a soft magic system. But there's a spectrum. So if you've got a magic system, it's not necessarily on either end. It doesn't have to be just a hard magic system or just a soft magic system. It might be somewhere in between, but edging towards one or the other probably.
And you prefer hard magic systems?
Sorry?
And you prefer hard magic systems over soft?
I think so. Well, I like them both because there's mystery and there's a bit of unknown elements with a soft magic system, but it's really cool to know exactly how everything works with a hard magic system. So I think they have pros and cons.
Yeah, totally.
But if you want to know, if anyone wants to know more, you can Google Brandon Sanderson, because he has a lecture about his magic laws.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'll link that in the post. This is amazing. Thanks for that. So what authors inspire your work? Obviously Tolkien, because your work is very Lord of the Rings-esque.
Yes, I love Lord of the Rings. I love The Hobbit. I also really like His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman.
Excellent, yeah.
So good. Both the series on Neon and the book series. What else? I really like Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo.
That's quite new, isn't it? Shadow and Bone.
It is quite new. I think it was written in like 2012-ish, but the Netflix series is just recently.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what got me onto it. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I better read the books first. And I was hooked.
You were hooked. You were like, and now it's time to make my own stories. I've learned all I need to learn.
Yeah. I also really like the Hunger Games.
Oh, classic.
So I go into dystopian and science fiction as well as fantasy, but fantasy is still definitely my main.
Yeah. Would you say there can be quite like a weird mix of fantasy and sci-fi?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. They can be like a cross genre.
Yeah,
I'm actually planning a dystopian science fiction novel at the moment.
Oh, are we allowed to know anything?
Yes. Yeah, so it's about a time traveler who knows that in the future there'll be a catastrophic disaster, but he doesn't know what it is. He just knows that there's one girl who can stop it, so he has to go and find her.
Well, that sounds so cool. Very frustrating for that poor person though.
Yeah.
He's like, I know what it is, but now I need to find this girl. Oh, that's great. And so you're writing that now?
Yes, yeah, it's in the like early draft, still kind of planning stages. Yeah.
So there's just post-it notes around your room?
Yeah, lots of post-it notes. I think I've got 4 big sheets of paper.
Amazing.
With lots of post-it notes on it, and they're rolled up at the moment, but when they come out, they take up an awful lot of space.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do. An organized book is key, truly.
Yeah.
Final question: what makes a good fantasy novel, in your opinion? That's a bit of a hard question.
Well, I think in general, I think there are 4 rules for me. I think you need strong, interesting characters. I think you need a good villain and a good twist and an interesting, unique world. So I think those are the 4 main things. But the main thing for me is the characters. In general, the plot can do like nothing crazy, but more it can go in a few directions so long as I really like the characters. Yeah. Because if you're not connected to the characters, there's no point because you don't care what happens.
Yeah, there are so many cool books and TV shows that are like sci-fi or fantasy that have really cool concepts, but the execution is done fine. It's just the characters tend to fall on the wayside. And you're like, why am I watching this?
Yeah. And the world is also important because you need it to be in an interesting setting.
Oh yeah,
but totally. To counteract that, if you have really interesting characters, it could still be really interesting if they were just in a plain like white room. Like that would they could still make it work and be interesting.
Yeah. One of my favorite plays is just 4 people in a room talking and then they slowly realize they're all in hell. And they're making each other miserable, and that is their personal version of hell. It's kind of like the good.
What's that called? That sounds really good.
Oh gosh, I cannot remember. I will email you when I find it. But it's an old play.
Really good.
It was originally in French. It's a 1-act play. So it's based on the show The Good Place is derived from that play actually.
Yeah, no, it actually reminded me of it when you said that. Like The Good Place.
Yeah, derived from that play. Crazy. Do you have any examples of exercises? I know you teach writing classes on your own, but if you could just spit out a couple of writing exercises.
So there's lots of really cool creatures in fantasy, right? Like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, or like the Volcra from Shadow and Bone. So a really easy way to create these creatures is to take 2 animals. They can be mythical or they can be made up. And think of like 3 traits from each of them and then combine them to make one animal. And you can think about what their name is and what they look like and if they're the last of their kind. And so you can ask them some questions kind of similar to interrogating characters. And then you can write a scene with them in or a description of the creature.
That's a great one.
Thank you.
What a solid one.
Yeah, another fun quick writing exercise is to write a scene based on a picture. And they're really easy to find on like Pinterest or just if you search up writing prompt image, You can get some really interesting, quite funny images.
Maybe that can be the challenge for young writers who are watching this, you know, and then they can submit it to the Facebook page. It'd be so cool. And you've got a website, you're on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Denika Mead Author and Instagram as Denika Mead. I have a website, denikameadauthor.com, and you can find all my books there. Or you can email me at denikamead@gmail.com.
Yeah, we'll link your email. You're very good with email. Very receptive.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you for having this conversation. You were great.